we're ranking all 58 brawlers from worst to best. This is for the competitive meta, specifically in Power League and Club League, and I wanted to give a huge thank you to the pro players who helped me make this. First up are the F tier brawlers. Don't play them, they're not competitive. For the second tier list, straight in a row, Edgar is the worst brawler in the game. He didn't get any changes, he's plenty easy to counter competitively, and Otis is out now, and he's even better at countering Edgar than most brawlers are. Jackie's also staying in the F tier. Not anything has changed for her either. Her attack and her super have like more range than Edgar's does, but like if she can't get close to anybody, then she can't do anything. Dynamite's moving from the C tier down into the F tier. With more and more evasive brawlers that are actually way up in the S tier, like Bonnie and Janet, Dynamite just gets countered a lot more than often, and he really struggles at the moment. Nita is staying in the F tier. She really is only good against brawlers who she can outrange, and those brawlers aren't, well, they're not the best at the moment, and also her bears are just getting easier and easier to get rid of because of new brawlers that have abilities that can kind of counter it. Next is Shelly, who's moving up from the second best to the best brawler in the F tier. She's still not good. She's just the best of the not good ones. She's one of the strongest close range brawlers in the game, but she has no way to approach enemies, so it's really easy for them to avoid her, which is why she's not competitive. Next is C tier brawlers, who are good under very specific circumstances. Well, maybe not good, but they're not awful. All of the time. At the bottom of the C tier, we have Poco, who is staying in the C tier. By himself, he's not that great, but he can be really good when he's helping tanking brawlers to stay alive, but even then, it's pretty easy to counter him. Colt is also staying in the C tier. Colt actually has really good range and DPS with his attacks, but they rarely actually hit if you're playing in competitive matches, and since he hasn't received any changes, he's staying in the C tier. Next is El Primo, who is also staying in the C tier. He's a little bit Edgar, but he's a lot tankier, a little bit more difficult to counter, especially the fact that he actually charges up his super when he takes damage, but not much has changed for him, so he's staying in the C tier. Jessie is also staying in the C tier, fourth in a row actually. You guys know Jessie. Her turret is really good against brawlers that can't reach it without getting hit, but brawlers that outrange it can usually do so without actually taking any damage at all, so she struggles competitively at the moment. Shout out to the old Jessie icon. Old habits die hard, guys. Nani is moving from the B tier to the C tier. I'm so sorry. I think the biggest reason Nani is moving down is because more and more brawlers have the shield gear on their low health brawlers. Nani was really good at one-shotting brawlers with her super, but if a brawler has that shield gear on, then it's really hard for Nani to take them out, so she's just not as competitive as she used to be. 8-Bit is moving from the A tier all the way down into the top of the C tier. 8-Bit obviously relies a lot on his super, and without his super, he struggles. Well, the thing is, we have a lot of brawlers that can jump on it or fly over to it or get cannonballed onto it that destroy it, and that makes him not as versatile as he used to be. Next is B tier brawlers. These are good on specific maps or modes, or maybe even with the right comps or to counter certain brawlers, but generally aren't the best. First up is Amber, who's actually staying near the bottom of the B tier. Amber's been in the B tier for a few tier lists, and she's one of those brawlers where she's really good at mid-range, but if brawlers are either too close or too far away, she struggles against them. Next is B, who is staying at the bottom of the B tier. Now, B's not the best option against other long-range brawlers, but sometimes she's the really safe long-range pick because she handles close-range brawlers so well, so she's got her uses. She's not the best, but she can work. Tick is also staying in the B tier. Tick is a really good area control brawler, so when you need area control and Tick doesn't have to be in a specific location, he can just stay safe behind the walls, that's really solid. However, he's not the best for 1v1 situations, and he has the lowest HP in the game, so he remains in the B tier. Next is Colette, also staying in the B tier. I know that not a lot has changed yet. I promise we're getting to the changes, okay? Interestingly enough, the previous tier list, Colette actually moved from the C up into the B tier because of how good her gadget is at dealing with tanky brawlers that were in the meta a little bit more frequently. Now, even though those tanks aren't in the meta so much now, she's still a B tier brawler. In the last tier list, BB was in the B tier, and in this tier list, BB is also in the B tier. Just trying to say B as many times as I can for you guys. I know there are a few of you who really rely on me to do that every tier list when BB and B are in the B tier. BB's got a short range with her regular attack, but she is one of the fastest brawlers in the game. Her speed, along with her high DPS, make her a solid B tier option in situations where you really need that. Next, we have Bull, who's actually going up from the C tier into the B tier. He hasn't had any balance changes, but I guess the way that the meta has shifted kind of really helped him out. Honestly, I don't know why the pros wanted him to move up there, but I trust them. So here he is in the B tier. Next is Meg, who is staying in the B tier. Obviously, Meg is the worst brawler in the game without her super, and with it, she's one of the best. So her being able to charge up her super is really important, but until she does that, she relies on her teammates, which is why she's in the B tier. Next is Lou, who's also staying in the B tier. He actually does pretty good damage, and he has really strong abilities and a very useful super, but his attacks are still pretty hard to land and pretty easy to dodge, which is why he's kind of been inconsistent and is now in the B tier. Barley is also staying in the B tier. Lots of B brawlers in the B tier. Now, Barley doesn't have the range like like some other throwers like Grom or Tick, and like in some ways also Sprout, but his attacks cover a wide area, plus his super is one of the best in the game for controlling large areas. But that means he has to be playing on a game where that's useful, which is why he's in the B tier. Next is Mortis, who's also staying in the B tier. Mortis is amazing at countering certain brawlers, but he is also very easy to counter, which is why he's in the B tier. He's great as a third pick, but not a number one pick. And Mortis is one of my favorites to play against when I'm playing Otis, so he's definitely not moving up in the world right now. Speaking of Otis, we have him starting off in the B tier. Hooray! That's kind of lame for him, actually. Before Otis was actually released into the game, everybody, including myself, said that he was way too strong, and so Supercell actually gave him a few nerfs before he was released because of how strong he was. I'm really glad that they did so, and I think they honestly did a great job with him, because sitting in the middle of the B tier, that's actually like a really great place for a new brawler to be. It's a little boring, but he has good range, his attacks are easy to use, his super can turn 1v1s into like instant wins, and while he's not the best brawler in the game at the moment, he has his place where he can counter close range brawlers or brawlers that like jump on you or things like that. And you know, as the third pick, Otis can be pretty great. Just make sure you have teammates that you can rely on. And also, really important thing about Otis is the fact that this is happening actually before his second star power and gadget are released. There is a chance that he will be stronger, and I think with his second star power that will be the case. However, for right now, he's sitting in the B tier. Next, we have Frank, who is staying in the B tier. Frank's one of those brawlers where he has so much HP that I have a hard time believing that he'll ever not be at least B tier, okay? He's not going to move up very high though, because he's super easy to pick on, and he just doesn't have that stopping power that, well, Frank feels like he kind of should. But he's great at countering certain brawlers, and he's actually pretty solid in the right situation, but not in every situation, which is why he's in the B tier. Next, we have Fang, who is perfectly balanced in the B tier in the last tier list, and is also still perfectly balanced as all things should be. As you guys know, Fang is very good at close range, and even though his shoe is very weak at a long distance away, it allows him to charge up his super, and sometimes you can actually get some kills with it every now and then. Not that frequently, but it works. Ever since his stunning gadget was nerfed, he has gone from overpowered to just fine, and that's why he's in B tier. Next is Buzz, who's moving from the bottom of the B tier up into like the middle of the B tier. He's actually running into the same problem that Dynamite is, which is there are too many brawlers that are high up in the meta that are very evasive. However, Buzz is still a lot more versatile than Dynamite is, and there's actually plenty of brawlers that can't do anything to counter him. So B tier is solid for him, although Otis is actually a great option to counter him. Mr. P is actually moving from the A tier down into the B tier. He didn't get any nerfs in the last update, but a few of the really strong brawlers at the top of the meta are actually really solid counters against Mr. P, because they can attack straight through his porters, and so moving from the A tier down to the B tier actually makes sense for him. Rosa is actually staying in the B tier right now. She relies a lot on bushes to get close to her enemies, and there aren't a lot of grassy maps in the competitive meta rotation right now, at least, you know, Club League and Power League. That being said, she still dominates maps that allow her to stay hidden and safely approach her enemies, so don't sleep on her. She's good in the right situation. Daryl is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. Just like the other close range assassins, Daryl is also taking a hit from the meta shift due to brawlers that can escape his range after he rolls onto them. With that said, until Daryl gets some sort of a nerf to his damage output, I don't think there's any way he's gonna be lower than B tier, because he's, well, I mean, he's kind of fun, and he can counter some solid brawlers with his super. Pam is moving from the A tier down into the B tier as well. Her healing pad is more vulnerable than it used to be because of popular brawlers that are very easy to destroy it. You know, you've got Squeaks, you've got Bonnie, you got Janet. She's still one of the easiest brawlers in the game to use because of how wide her attacks are, and her Scrap Sucker gadget is one of the best in the game. In 1v1 situations, it is game changing. So don't sleep on her too much, but for right now, she's in the B tier. Tara is also staying in the B tier. Kind of similar to Mr. P, Tara uses her clones from her gadget or her star power to block a lot of shots for her. But again, the top brawlers don't really have a problem just hitting through it, so she can't hide behind them as easily, and so she's not moving down, but she's definitely not moving up either. Brock is also staying in the B tier. He has a really long range, and his rockets have a decent blast radius, and he can deal a lot of damage. But his biggest problem right now is that his rockets have a slower projectile speed that can be pretty tough to hit brawlers that can move quickly, which we're seeing a fair amount of in the S and A tier. Sandy is moving from the A tier and into the B tier. If I'm being honest, I'm kind of happy about this. I kind of got sick of seeing Sandy everywhere. He received a nerf to his attack damage, which obviously reduced the number of brawlers that he was able to take out in 3 hits. And since he has one of the fastest unload speeds in the game, that was actually a pretty big nerf to him. Next is Rico, who's moving from the A tier down to the B tier as well. This is one I'm not so happy to see. I really like playing Rico, okay? He's been one of the best brawlers for shutting down like narrow pathways and maps with lots of walls and stuff. Lately, we've got other other brawlers that are flying all over the map, and Rico can't hide behind walls as easily as he used to, and so he's become a little bit less competitive. Ashe is moving from the S tier all the way down into the B tier. If it isn't obvious by now, the meta has done a number on the tanky brawlers in the game. He's still one of the best close range brawlers in the game, but it's just getting harder and harder for him to catch his enemies off guard. And a big reason why he's moving down as well is the fact that Byron actually got nerfed, and Byron's not as competitive as he used to be, and Ashe was only really strong with Byron in the first place, so, you know, that makes sense he's moving down. Griff is staying in the B tier, but he's moving up toward the very top of it. Griff has just steadily gotten better over the past few updates. He's another brawler that just kind of slightly benefits from this meta because the brawlers that play well against him have become a little bit worse. So he's not changing enough to actually swap tiers, but he's a little bit better, so maybe consider him. Next to A tier brawlers, we're finally getting into competitive options here. These are well-rounded brawlers that can handle a lot of different situations that you usually want to try and build your team comps around. They're just not quite as good as the S tier brawlers. Our first A tier brawler is Sprout. Obviously, Sprout really struggles to hit enemies that are close up to it, but if it's against a team comp that can't break through or get around its super, Sprout is like a #1 pick. It is so strong. Next is Bo, who's moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Now, he didn't receive any buffs this update, but he received a projectile speed buff in the previous update. It's taken a little bit for us to realize exactly how strong he is, but A tier seems to be really solid for him. He's actually like pretty competitive. And since he's competitive at the pro level, that means that he's probably one of the best brawlers at the non-pro level where people aren't as good at tripping those mines. Byron is getting dethroned. He is moving from the S tier down into the A tier. Byron has received nerf after nerf, and this update was no different. This nerf to his reload speed was finally the one that he needed to kick him out of the S tier, but the fact that he's still in the A tier should tell you how good of a brawler he still is. Still, feel free to use him. He's going to be one of my best and favorite brawlers to use, but just not quite as solid as he used to be. Eve, oh my word, she is moving from the S tier down to the A tier as well. The Eve has received nerf after nerf after nerf, and this last nerf to her second star power was the one that needed to happen for her to move from the S tier down to the A tier. She is still very strong at the moment, so make sure you're still considering her. She's just not the powerhouse as she used to be, not the go-to option or immediate ban every single time like she used to be. Gale is staying in the A tier for this tier list. Obviously, he counters tanks really well, and we're not seeing as many tanks in this tier list as we have in the past, but his star powers are just so good that he can hold his own in pretty much any game mode against pretty much any brawler. He's so versatile and almost always useful, which is why he's actually a solid one to try and focus on getting to power 11 at the moment. Colonel Ruffs is moving from the S tier down into the A tier. He received a nerf to his take cover gadget this update, and while it seemed kind of small, it clearly made a difference for him. But now we're actually starting to see more players use his other gadget, which is, it's actually not that bad. Piper is staying in the A tier for this tier list. She's just a solid A tier brawler pretty much every update. On any map where she has somewhat of an ability to have a long range attack, like, she's gonna do solid. Her only weakness is close range combat, and she has a super and a gadget that can help her out with that. So depending on what the enemy is actually going to be playing, you can choose a gadget that's going to make her pretty useful still. Penny is making one of the biggest changes from the F tier all the way up into the A tier for this tier list. She received a massive rework, and it has definitely been the rework that Penny needed, and we've all been waiting for. Both of her gadgets and star powers were reworked, and her old star power is now a permanent ability, which is, she's really solid and very annoying to play against, so you should probably ban her a lot. Grom is moving from the C tier all the way up into the A tier. He did receive a nerf to his super damage, but he got a huge buff to his attack damage, and that was what was needed to move him all the way up into the A tier. He's able to 3-shot way more brawlers with his attack, and even though his super is weaker than it was before, it's still a very strong super. Jean is staying in the A tier for this tier list. I've mentioned this before, but Jean with his super as it is, it's gonna be pretty hard for him to fall out of the A tier unless they nerf his super specifically, right? It is absolutely game-changing and can even just one gene pull is all it takes for you to win a bounty match, a gem grab match, even a brawl ball or a knockout match. He does get countered by a few brawlers in the game, but if there's a genie in the game and he has to super charge up, you have to pay attention to him or you will get punished, which is why he's so good at the moment. Ems is staying in the A tier. It's not really anything broken about Ems, but everything about her is above average. She's got an above average range, she deals a fair amount of damage, she has got a strong super, decent gadget and star power, a fair amount of health. She's just well-rounded in a lot of situations and can deal with a lot of different types of brawlers. Next is Surge, who is staying in the A tier. Honestly, the only reason why Surge isn't in the S tier is because of how difficult it is to upgrade past his first level. His gadgets do a good job of helping him do that, but once he upgrades to level 3 and 4, he is one of the best brawlers in the game, so he definitely deserves at least staying in the A tier. Also staying in the A tier is Belle. Belle's been a really solid option ever since she was even first released, okay? Her attack and her super have a very long range. It prevents enemies from bouncing or staying close to each other, which can change a lot of the ways you play, and if they do stay close to each other, they get punished really hard. She can be played in most game modes and is all the way around a really solid option. Next we have Leon, who's also staying in the A tier. He's one of the best assassins in the game because he doesn't have to be like right next to an enemy in order to deal massive damage. Plus, if enemies do manage to escape from him, he's got plenty of range to recharge his super and try and take them out again. Max is also staying in the A tier. She's one of the best brawlers in the game for dodging enemy attacks, and not only does her super and her gadget help her avoid attacks, but her super helps her entire team dodge attacks, which gives you a massive advantage in any situation. Using that super is the key to actually really using her, but if you can do so, she's amazing. Stu is staying in the A tier. He's got really useful gadgets and his entire team usually benefits from them pretty much the whole match. He's also extremely hard to hit once he charges his super, and it's really easy for him to chain 3 or 4 supers right in a row. He's a really high skill cap brawler, but if you can master him, he's just insane. Next is Spike, who is staying in the A tier once again. Spike deals so much damage, especially for how far his attacks can reach, and even for people who do have practice dodging his curveball star power, it is really hard to avoid since it covers such a large area. Honestly, I don't know about you guys, I'm getting kind of sick of Spike being in top of the meta, so I would welcome a change to him somehow. Next is Crow, who's moving from the S tier to the very top of the A tier. In this meta, we have brawlers that are super good at evading, and even with Crow's ability to slow them down for 5 seconds, it's not quite as useful and not quite as strong a counter as it used to be. I still think it's completely unfair, and I wish that they would rework Crow just a little bit. I mean, it's one of the best gadgets in the game, and even with his extra toxic star power, he's pretty much good in any situation. Not to mention the fact that he's really good at countering other healers like Byron and Pam. Finally, we've got the S tier brawlers. These are the best brawlers in the game, and this is actually a smaller S tier than a lot of previous tier lists. So you got a few brawlers you want to ban pretty much every time. At the bottom of the S tier is Squeak, 2 tier lists in a row. Between his residue gadget and his super sticky star power, he can slow down multiple brawlers at once, and they stay slowed for a long time. He can even have more than one residue gadget activated at a time, and he deals enough damage that I mean, he's just, oh man. If he can easily hit his shots against a slow target, he's insane. In fact, if he's able to slow down multiple brawlers at a time, he can completely wipe out the entire enemy team because of how much damage he can do. Next, we have Lola, also staying in the S tier. Lola's stats are so strong, guys. There aren't very many brawlers that can easily counter her. Her attack is super easy to land because of its width and really long distance, plus it deals so much damage, and once she gets her ego out, her attack becomes even wider and stronger, deals even more damage. She becomes really tanky. Her gadget's insane. Lola is so good. Now, I wanted to mention that these next 3 brawlers were voted as the top 3 by basically every pro that I asked, so they almost belong in their own special tier. And that first one is Bonnie, staying in the S tier. Her cannon form may move slow, but its projectile speed is so fast that you honestly, you don't even have to really aim. It's really good. Her super is also one of the best in the games because not only does it allow her to get close to enemies, but when she's in her melee form, she can escape. She's so fast. She has a small hitbox. She deals so much damage. She can even take out multiple enemies at once because her attacks are splash damage if they're really close to each other. Next, we have Carl, who's moved from the C tier all the way up into the S tier. The second best brawler in the game right now. I've said this before, but Carl is one of the hardest brawlers to balance, and this update just proves that, right? All they did was increase his projectile speed just a tiny bit, and he went from being one of the worst brawlers in the game to one of the best. Even with all the abilities in the game that can easily interrupt his super, he's still incredibly evasive and he deals so much damage, and it's so easy to hit your shots with him now. Carl's insane, guys. And our final brawler at the very top of the S tier, moving from the B tier, is Janet. Wow, we really underestimated how strong Janet was, okay? She is incredibly versatile, okay? Her main attack does, I mean, the range is insane. She deals a fair amount of damage with it. It can go through any number of targets, and on top of that, her gadget and star power are all like, she's like unkillable, okay? She can use her super to not only escape any attack, but she then gets a few seconds to drop bombs on enemies and still has time to get away from them. I really didn't expect Janet to be as insanely strong as she is, but the pros have spoken. She is the best brawler in the game. And there you have it, version 28 of the Brawl Stars competitive tier list. If you would like to share this with anybody, I ask you do 2 things. First of all, don't crop out my face as I smile right now. There's your screenshot. I ask that you also include this screenshot with all of the pros on here as well, because they put a lot of time and effort into helping make this right. So I want to know what you guys think about this tier list. So let me know in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe for some more awesome tier lists in the future. I will be doing this, well, I mean, probably forever. I don't know. And also make sure you guys subscribe for my other channels, including my Free Fire channel right here. Here is another awesome video for Brawl Stars. And for now, this is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in Brawl Stars.